Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Hamid Elamir. I am the host of podcast with Dr. E. At this podcast, I sit with the world's experts in health, education, and community development to talk about current health challenges and ask them to share their experience, knowledge, and thoughts with all nations across the world, especially with developing countries, so that we can learn from experts across the globe. My guest today is an amazing physician and an author. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Deborah Matthew is with us on the show. Thank you for your time, Dr. Deb.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be here.
It's a pleasure. Deborah Matthew MD, the Happy Hormones Doctor, is a best-selling author, international speaker, educator, wife, and mother of four. After suffering for years with fatigue and irritability, her quest to resolve her personal health led to change everything about her practice of medicine. Now, she helps her patients get well, get off prescription drugs, and love the way they feel. She has been featured on national podcasts, radio, and broadcast shows, including NBC, ABC, CBS, and Fox. Her latest book, Why Can't I Keep Up Anymore, will be published soon in November this year. We'll hear more about her book also at the end of this show. Please stay tuned. Today we will be discussing the stress and disease, the science and solutions with Dr. Deb. Life demands are often challenging and require intense physical and psychological efforts in order to be sustained. Especially during this pandemic, life-work balance is challenging. How we react to stress is crucial to know because it may potentially be health-threatening by activating interconnected neuroendocrine circuits. Before jumping to the main topic, I just wanted to ask you, I read in your bio how you switched to help your patients and have a better, a different perspective and different look to your practice, suffering from fatigue. Can you just tell us why you do what you do? Maybe just briefly about what made you change your focus on medicine.
Yeah, well, I was healthy in the sense that I didn't have any chronic diseases that I knew of, but I just didn't feel good. I was, like you said, tired all the time, and I was so irritable. I found myself just snapping at my kids way too often, and my poor husband had to tread softly because he never knew whether I was going to be the good witch or the wicked witch of the West. I was unpredictable, and it was so confusing to me because I didn't understand what was happening to me. There was really nothing in my medical training that helps to explain why I was feeling this way. And the turning point for me came when I read a book that was written by Suzanne Summers about women's hormones. And I'm sure that you can understand that as doctors, we do not like to get our medical information from celebrities. And you know, Suzanne Summers, right? I remember her as Chrissy Snow in Three's Company comedy show. This is not somebody that I thought would change my life. But when I read that book and I read about how these women were feeling when their hormones were out of balance and how much better they felt when they were able to get their hormones in balance, suddenly all the things that I was feeling made total sense. And this allowed me to open my mind. And I found that there were places where I could go to be trained to do things differently. There was real science behind this. It's not woo-woo medicine.
Right.
And so once I learned, I was able to get my hormones balanced and I got my energy back. My kids got their mom back. My husband got his wife back. I got my life back, but I just couldn't go back to writing a prescription for every little thing. So now I help people get to the root cause of why they're not feeling good. And we fix that, whether it's balancing their hormones or restoring nutritional balance if they've got vitamin or mineral deficiencies or reducing inflammation or whatever it is. so that they can feel great and potentially not need some of those prescription medicines anymore.
Great, great. Books are very powerful. So that book that made you think about medicine differently and about hormones specifically, and your own book coming up soon that we'll talk at the end. I can't just emphasize enough on how important books can be in people's lives.
I agree.
Let's get started on the questions about this topic. As we talked earlier, on the topic today is the stress. And what is the mechanism by which chronic stress causes disease?
Yeah, so we all know that we don't feel good when we're stressed out, right? We know that we don't sleep well. We know that we, tend to eat the wrong foods. We know how we feel when we're stressed. But let's talk about why we feel that way when we're stressed and how it causes our body to go wrong and develop disease. And the really important factor is our stress hormone cortisol. So when our brain
Right.
senses that we have stress, it sends signals to our body to release more cortisol. And in the short term, that's good. Cortisol helps us cope with stress. And then when the stress passes by, the cortisol level goes back down and everything goes back to normal. The problem is when we have stress day in and day out, our cortisol levels become chronically elevated, and it's that chronically elevated cortisol that causes problems. Because, back in the olden days when we had stress, it usually involved things like running for our life. There was a saber-toothed tiger chasing us, and that running for our life would burn off the excess cortisol. And then when we got to safety, it would be okay. But today, if you're sitting in your car and you're running late and there's traffic, or if you're sitting in your home and you're worried about a pandemic, there's no burning off the excess cortisol. And so it accumulates. And cortisol is such an important hormone in our body because hormones are chemical messengers, right? They tell our cells what to do. And cortisol is a very important regulating hormone. So it regulates so many important functions in our body. It regulates our blood sugar levels. It regulates our sleep-wake cycle. So when you're stressed, that's why you may not sleep well at night and feel real tired during the day. Cortisol affects our immune system function. And of course, we all need to have an immune system this year more than any other time. And our immune system just doesn't function as well when we are under stress and our cortisol levels are not quite right. And another way that cortisol affects our body is that it impacts our gut microbiome. Those are the trillions of bacteria that live in our digestive tract. And it turns out that those bacteria are really, really important for keeping us well, for regulating our immune system function. And so that's another reason why when stress happens and our cortisol function becomes out of whack, our immune system and our overall health takes a hit.
Great, thank you. Let me ask you the question, how does it feel when cortisol is imbalanced?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the listeners today are going to be able to relate to this.
All
So
right.
let me quickly tell you what is supposed to happen because cortisol has a circadian rhythm. It changes over the course of the day. And so what's supposed to happen is it's supposed to go way up in the wee hours of the morning so that your eyes pop open and you're ready to jump out of your bed and get started with your day. And then it's supposed to gradually go down over the course of the day so that you're relaxed at night and you fall asleep and you sleep soundly through the night. But what happens to a lot of people is they don't get that nice boost in cortisol in the morning. Cortisol is like long acting adrenaline. So it's kind of like you get this little mini adrenaline boost in the morning. So when it's out of whack, you don't get that boost. So your alarm clock goes off and you press snooze a couple of times. And then even when you like drag your body out of bed, your brain is just not quite all the way fully functioning yet. And you need some caffeine because caffeine boosts cortisol levels in your brain so that you can function like a human being. So you get going in the morning and then you're okay and you get started with your day until the bewitching hour around 2 or 3 in the afternoon when we just hit this slump. And then you need more caffeine or some sugar or a power nap or something just to get you through till supper time. And for a lot of people, they start to feel better around supper. But then early in the evening, like 7:30, you're sitting on the couch watching TV and your eyes are nodding off and you're so tired. But that's kind of early for a lot of us to go to bed. And
Right.
if you stay up late enough, like 10 or 11 o'clock, now your brain is wide awake and you can't fall asleep. And a lot of people even find that they get their best work of the day done late at night. They're kind of a night owl without really understanding why. It's hard to fall asleep. And then even when they do fall asleep, they find themselves waking up at 2 a.m. and at 4 a.m. And then there's that darn alarm clock again too soon in the morning. So that's almost normal. Like in our society, it's almost normal to need caffeine in the morning or for people to take sleeping pills to be able to fall asleep, but it is not normal. And that is one of the ways that stress impacts our body. Does that sound sort of, I mean, have you heard lots of people complain about feeling that way?
Absolutely. I was just nodding when you were talking all about this, and I hear it repeatedly from my clients, from friends and family, and not to mention when we ourselves went to school, like we having the coffee in the mornings, and then have another one, like especially with the finals and everything. That reminds me of those days as well.
Yeah,
And of
we're
course,
just used to it, right?
yeah, exactly. And you mentioned a very important point there, like when people are, just going to bed and then waking up again at 2 o'clock in the morning. So cortisol is really important. It's critical, and how you balance cortisol in your body. It basically affects any, like, all functions of the body, like just not only stress control, but how stress contributes to a lot of other problems, like sleeplessness and all that. I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah.
The question that, apart from stress, I mean from cortisol, what other hormones that are affected by stress?
Yeah, well, this is a really important thing because so we're saying that stress causes a change in cortisol, which affects how you feel. But cortisol is such an important regulating hormone and it regulates many, many of our other hormones. So, one of the hormones that cortisol helps to regulate is thyroid. And so, your thyroid gland, which sits right here in your neck, your thyroid gland makes thyroid hormone, which helps to speed up your metabolism and give you energy. But when you are under stress and there's cortisol is not right, it shuts down how the thyroid hormone works in your body. So it's not so much that it affects your thyroid gland, but you can't use the thyroid hormone at the cellular level. It affects the activation of T3 thyroid hormone, which is the
Right.
one that activates your cells. And if you don't have that T3 activating your cells, it feels like you're hypothyroid. So you get tired and your memory's not good, and you can have mood symptoms, depression or anxiety, and you gain weight. You can feel cold, dry skin, dry hair, constipation, hair falling out, low libido. There's this huge list of symptoms. And I hear this a lot, that people come to me and say, like, I'm sure I had to have a thyroid problem, but my doctor checked my labs and said I was normal.
Right.
Well, it may be because your thyroid gland is fine, but due to stress, your cortisol levels are not fine, and they're making it so that your cells can't use your thyroid hormone. I
Mhm.
see that all the time. And a more expanded thyroid lab panel can sometimes help us to sort that out. Another really important hormone that is affected by cortisol, especially for men, is testosterone. So,
Mhm.
testosterone is a build and repair hormone, and it gives you confidence and self esteem and motivation and competitive drive. And when testosterone levels aren't that great, we tend to just feel more flat and um, just kind of put one foot in front of the other to make our way through the day and kind of get the stuff done that we really need to do, but we kind of lose that zip. And this is true for men and for women. But when cortisol goes up, it tends to shut testosterone production down, and it even interferes with how testosterone can bind to the cells and activate them. So uh, it is not unusual for us to find low testosterone in men. It's becoming actually quite a common thing, even in younger and younger men. And one of the reasons is cortisol interfering. So it's not that you can't make testosterone and that you need testosterone replacement. It's that the stress is inhibiting your natural production of testosterone. And so we got to be thinking over here about your cortisol level. And a third one that is really, really important is insulin. So insulin is the one that regulates your blood sugar. And so many people struggle with their blood sugar these days. We've got an epidemic of diabetes, and many, many, many more people have pre-diabetes and just don't even have any idea. But insulin regulates our blood sugar. And when cortisol is off, it makes it so that insulin doesn't work well, and it pushes you to pre-diabetes and diabetes. And when insulin's not working well, then insulin is the fat storing hormone. So we end up gaining more weight, especially around our midsection. And insulin problems can cause cortisol problems. Cortisol problems cause insulin problems. If your testosterone is low, that makes insulin worse. And of course, cortisol causes testosterone problems. So all these hormones impact each other and they work together. And stress can be the thing that really kind of pushed the dominoes over, and then one domino tips the next one and tips the next one.
Right. It's very important. The more we talk and the more, we know. I mean, obviously our audience who are not health professionals know that how important the level, controlling your cortisol level is. And you mentioned about diabetes, the insulin level, you mentioned about testosterone, you mentioned about, the stress itself. And it's, I can't emphasize enough on the importance of this and how people should be aware of this important hormone in their body and to keep it balanced. And I just wanted to have a follow-up question on this. I know you also you're also an expert in functional medicine. If so, when it comes to stress level and all, and people go to conventional medicine doctors and getting some prescriptions and medications, and of course medications they all have side effects, almost all, maybe all. The question now is that how would you use your expertise in functional medicine to help your clients and patients control their stress level and cortisol?
Yeah, that's a really important question, because all doctors know that stress causes people to not feel good and promotes disease. Like, we know that, and we are taught that at medical school. The problem is that we're not taught the tools to fix it. And if you go into your doctor and you're worried something's wrong with you and they say, oh, it's just stress, like, to some effect, we feel relieved, right? At least it's not some terrible disease, but that's not very helpful because it's not really a solution to our problem. And you don't really need a doctor to say you should reduce stress, because I don't know, nobody needs a medical degree to know that we should all reduce our stress, right? But there really are some things that can be done. It's just that they're not the things that we were trained to do in medical school. So the first thing that we can do is we can actually measure your cortisol levels. And in medical school, we are trained to do certain cortisol tests that are measuring for serious life-threatening diseases, like Cushing's, which is a tumor that makes way too much cortisol, or Addison's, which is when your adrenal glands can't function, they can't make cortisol anymore. You probably don't have those things, though. Those are rare conditions. Whereas what I'm talking about, where your cortisol is just not working properly or optimally, is probably one of the most common things. Like, probably we all have it in 2020. We can measure cortisol, though, in different kinds of tests. And the important thing here is cortisol levels change over the course of the day. There's this circadian rhythm that is really, really important. So if you just went into your doctor's office on any random Thursday afternoon and asked for a cortisol test, they could draw your blood there on the spot, but it's going to be completely different than if you had your appointment at 8 o'clock in the morning or at noon. So it's not very helpful. The way that works a lot better is if we can measure your cortisol level multiple times over the same 24-hour period. And we can do that in a saliva test, which is kind of the gold standard now, or we can also do it in a urine test where you pee on these little test strips, almost like doing pregnancy tests. You pee on the little test strip multiple times in the day. And then we can see, do you have that nice peak in the morning and then it's going down at night? Is yours flipped around backwards? And seeing what this pattern is actually really, really important, and maybe even more important than the total amount of cortisol production. So it may not be that you're dumping out way too much cortisol or you're not able to make nearly enough. both of those are bad. But if you're just making too much at the wrong time of day, that's bad too. So when you have stress and you have a problem with cortisol, that's one of the things that promotes heart disease. And when we look at cortisol tests, we can look at the people whose cortisol levels are too high. So that's bad. And that promotes heart disease. But what was actually worse was if your cortisol level was flat. You didn't have that nice peak in the morning and dip in the evening. If yours was kind of flat, you had an even greater risk for heart disease. There was a study done looking at teachers. It wasn't done this year. I can only imagine what it would look like if we were testing teachers' cortisol levels this year. But there were the teachers who described themselves as being, overworked and stressed out, and their cortisol levels were high. And then there were the teachers who described themselves as feeling overwhelmed and burned out. Their cortisol levels were low. They didn't even have enough cortisol to get themselves through their day. And how we address this would be a little different if your cortisol is too high, but following a normal cycle, or if your cortisol is too low, or if your cortisol is flattened and you're making too much at the wrong time. So doing these kinds of tests can be really, really useful. But if you march into your regular doctor's office and request something like this, you need to prepare to be disappointed, because this is not something that is done by standard doctor's offices covered under your health insurance. You would need to find a functional medicine practitioner to help you with this. But the testing can be really helpful because there are things that we can do. And you don't have to live like this. There really is a lot that can be done to help.
Right, absolutely. Um, it's, as you mentioned, it's not only important to test your cortisol level, but it's important what time of the day you test it, because as you mentioned, like it, the results in the morning is different than the results in the evening, and people should be aware of that as well.
Yeah.
And you also briefly talked about burnout, and I think not only the general public, but also healthcare professionals nowadays, especially during this pandemic. It's life is not easy, working under pressure, which medicine is by nature. That kind of work, you're always,
even at the best of times, right?
exactly, you're always competing and with the time, and you have to be delivering what you should. And that in that topic, you just reminded me of that topic of burnout, which I will be putting another event for healthcare professionals, a panel discussion about that.
Yeah.
So let's
And can
yeah,
I just make a comment about burnout?
yeah, absolutely.
Is one of the challenges is, as doctors,
Mhm.
we know how to identify it. We know that we're feeling it. We know that it's bad. We know why it's
Right,
happening to us, but they didn't teach us what to do to fix it. And
that's
so
a good point.
that's one of the things that, part of the problem is if we get trapped in circumstances and in a system and we can't really get out, we don't have options. That's bad. But there are things that we can do to help minimize the effects of stress on our body. And those are the things that those are the tools they didn't give us at medical school.
Absolutely. And that's why I put a panel discussion that, since you brought it up, it would be, that's on the 16th of November. I'm putting a panel discussion with experts, medical doctors, health professionals from all walks of health, to see it from different angles, and as a package offer the solution for that. And that's what we need. We know it, but sometimes people just ignore medical professionals, or unfortunately sometimes it's just a stigma, like they
Yeah.
don't want to even talk about it. um, Let me ask you, the speaking of the solutions, and what can we do to help reduce stress?
Yeah. So this is a really big thing, but I want to give a few tips that are real simple that any of us can do.
Right.
So the first one is to try to simplify. Sometimes we try to be everything to everyone. The holidays are coming, right? And we try to have the perfect Thanksgiving dinner and the perfect Christmas. So simplify. If something's not really that important, maybe it doesn't really need to get done. Maybe good enough is good enough and it doesn't have to be perfect. So wherever you can simplify, that really helps. Another really, really helpful one is to breathe. When you take big, slow, deep breaths, it changes your stress response. So when you're stressed, it's our sympathetic nervous system that reacts. That's our fight or flight response. And
Right.
our heart rate speeds up and our blood pressure goes up. Everything is ready to help us run from that saber-toothed tiger. When we take deep, slow breaths, we activate our relaxation response, our parasympathetic nervous system. And I am a very, I don't know, concrete thinker. And so this actually helps me to think about it is when you take deep, slow breaths, your diaphragm goes up and down, right? That's the bellows that's pulling the air in and out of your lungs. And when you
Correct.
take bigger breaths, that diaphragm goes up and down farther. And your vagus nerve is attached from your diaphragm up to your brain stem. So basically those deep breaths are pulling on the vagus nerve essentially and yanking on your brain stem to tell it to slow down. So big, deep, slow breaths activate the relaxation response. And so that's a second thing that all of us can do. You don't have to do special training. You don't have to have special time. You don't have to drive to the gym.
Right.
Exercise is a great stress reliever. So exercise helps. Feeling gratitude is really important, especially 2020 when this has been such a year. We can all find something to be grateful for, even if you have to dig a little, right? You could be grateful that the sky is blue today. But when you feel grateful, it shifts the chemistry in your body, and you can't feel fear and anxiety and bitterness and anger at the same time as you're feeling grateful. So you could, if you every day you could have a journal and write down 3 things that you're grateful for, or you could stick something up on your fridge to keep reminding yourself. But gratitude is a wonderful antidote to stress. And then the last thing that I would mention is what you think about matters a lot. And if you are thinking about the worst case scenarios and worrying about things, and you're always sort of the glass is half empty, and you take whatever your stress level is, whatever your bad situation, and you just increase the negative effects on your body. So if you can swap what you're thinking, and you can be an optimistic person and look for the positive and be the glass half full kind of person, you can take that same amount of stress, that same bad circumstance, and you can really protect your body against the effects of stress. So if you can catch yourself thinking, whatever the negative thoughts are, and change your thinking, it is very powerful medicine. The tricky part is you have to recognize that you're doing it, because sometimes when you're caught in those thought patterns going around and around in your head, it's hard to break out of it. And sometimes it takes a physical thing, like saying the word stop out loud or holding up your hand. Those physical things sometimes help you jolt your brain so that you can turn your thoughts to something more positive. But your brain doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. So if you're walking down a dark alley and you're really worried that somebody's going to jump out and mug you, your brain is going to set that stress response into play, even if there's nobody out there. So what you think about really matters.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And stress and cortisol level, this topic is huge. It's I'm pretty sure that the audience has they have learned a lot today, and obviously they're looking for more to learn. And in order to learn more about this topic, I would ask you where the audience can find you. And you also talked about your book. Please let us know about that. When is it coming out? And also how the audience can find you to learn more about this very important topic.
So to learn more, my website is signaturewellness.org, not .com, it's .org. And the name of the book is Why Can't I Keep Up Anymore? It's a guide to regaining energy, focus, and physical and sexual performance for men over 40. There's a whole chapter in there on cortisol and stress, and lots of other lifestyle tips and hormone-related tips in order to help people really feel their best, because I believe that living well is the best medicine.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you for sharing that. And I like the title of your book. I'm pretty sure that the content of the book is very as interesting as the title itself. Dear audience, you can also go to the website that is on the screen. You can see it. Then learn more about this important topic. And thank you again so much, Dr. Deb, for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. And dear audience, for more topics such as this one, stay tuned and listen to Dr. E podcast. Thank you.